And we're trying to get hold of the cultural wisdom of our time, the actual wisdom that's present. We're probing beneath what is conscious, or we're trying to get way down beneath to get hold of those latent images of human wisdom that are just present in the midst of our world today. And so it's an effort to try to bring out of our almost collective unconscious, to use the psychological phrase, in order to get hold for the depth of humanness of our time. And certainly this would be true when we're dealing with the area of the arts. Or in the area of the arts, as we're dealing this morning, we're trying to get hold of an area that at the very moment that you're trying to talk about it, it's moved beyond your own presence to that area. And I think this will be clear as we talk about it. But we have been dealing with the various aspects of cultural wisdom, the psychological this week, this morning ending up with the artful humanities, the social sciences over against the historical humanities, and we will turn eventually to deal with the natural sciences over against the philosophical humanities. And in these areas, again, we're always dealing with those just givens in life, those just presence in life, those relationships that are just there in the midst of life, but always also, since it is cultural wisdom and not simply the therenesses, it's dealing with our presence to that. So that even when we're dealing with the sciences over here, we are in a way dealing with the poursoir of the sciences, or to put it more accurately, everything we're talking about here is humanities, or is the arts, even when we're talking about the sciences, because we're not particularly interested in what goes on in laboratories and the scientific data that's in journals and so forth and so on. That's a part of that which is behind everything we're doing, certainly, and it must have relationships to it, but obviously we're not scientists, and nor do we need to be scientists. We need, however, to get hold of the images of man that are coming out of man's grappling with the scientific disciplines. And so we're always dealing with man's presence with it, but we're doubly dealing with man's presence to his presence, so to speak, when we're dealing head-on with the humanities, as we are doing in the fourth session of these theoretical disciplines. And so the ensoir and the poursoir are present in all that we're doing here, and as we grasp hold of these, as we deal with the basic givens here and try to build our models in all of these areas, it's pretty clear that our whole model is finally called into question itself. That is, unless we are able, through dealing with a given oversimplified model, and model always is an oversimplification, of course, in dealing with that, we expose our own reductionisms, our own attempts to reduce life to this or that or the other within it. And so we found ourselves reducing life down to the biological psychology or to the social psychology or even to the rational. The rational is much more difficult for us to see our reductionism because it is the edge of our time and therefore has a kind of comprehensiveness to it for us that will obviously not be so 200 years from now or more, or whenever, or 10 years from now. You begin to wonder how often changes will take place that will make what we're doing today behind the times. I guess it always is that way. So when we're coming to deal in this area, in one way we've already dealt with it, and that's one reason why we can only spend, or one reason why dealing in this area is not necessary to spend but one in contrast to the other. But the other reason is we probably have greater knowledge in this area. Even if we are scientists who are studying science, we probably know more in terms of the cultural heritage and wisdom here, and even what is going on in our world today in this area than in this. In other words, the sciences are the edge of our time and require much more attention brought to bear upon them. But we are interested here this morning in dealing with the humanity, in dealing with the art for humanity, or to deal with man's naked awareness of, or naked dealing with the transcendence of life that comes in and through the arts. The arts and all of the humanities are always that which jar us out of our ordinary experiences of life in order to deal with the fullness of life. Or it always is a rending that takes place when you encounter the historical dimensions, when you encounter the artful dimensions, when you encounter the philosophical dimensions. And they do it in different ways, of course. In the artful dimension, as we put it, here's the individual pole. And so what is jarred loose here is our own individual experiences of life, our own individual experiences of the deeps of being a human being. You to watch an art form, to see Guernica or to see something that's done in our time, draws us out, pulls us loose from our ordinary experiences of ourselves as individuals primarily. In the historical dimension, we're jarred loose, obviously, by the social givens of our time. And we don't need to spell that out very far. We're in an existential situation at the moment in which the social dimension is jarring us loose from all of our senses of safety, of security, so forth and so on. This is the historical dimension. In other words, what I'm trying to say here is I'm not talking about academic discipline in the first instance whatsoever. I'm talking about dimensions of humanness or dimensions of human wisdom that are just present in the midst of life. In the philosophical dimension, that which is jarred loose, obviously, is when we have all those presuppositions about life yanked out from under us, those things that we just take for granted, that this is the way things ought to be. When that happens, our whole universe collapses, and the universal or comprehensive dimension of life is called into question once again. And so here is what we're talking about. That human consciousness, or being a human being, for men in the 20th century comes to him in and through these various areas. And what we're saying or what is being said, and John Paul Sartre makes it very clear, if you can say it's clear in being and nothingness, nothing is very clear there, but what he's saying, obviously, is that when man confronts the nothingness of life, there is where he be. Or when man experiences the bunghole in the midst of existence, there's where he's a human being. Or you have no human life without self-consciousness, and you have no human life save you experience the negations of life. And we've seen that in and through the psychological discipline of how the no's are said to us as biological propensities, and therefore we are always those who refuse to receive those no's in life, and that is the spirit dimension of life. And we are those who refuse to receive our social insecurity, and therefore here is the spirit dimension of life. And we refuse to receive the absurdities and irrationalities of life in the midst of our demand upon us to have meaning. Or to put it quite plainly in Christian categories, we're dealing with the area of sin when we talk about man's self-consciousness. Or, if you wish to refer to mythology, just read the story in Genesis. That man comes into self-consciousness precisely at the moment in which he refuses to be the person he's demanded to be. Or when man refuses to be, that's when he becomes self-conscious as a human being. And therefore, separation is existence, to use our friend Tilly. So the question of art is the one we're confronted with this morning. And just to reiterate one more time, this has nothing to do with what goes on in the gallery or what takes place on a canvas or what takes place on a stage or what goes on in the midst of some people playing around on some instruments or someone saying or writing something in the first instance. It has to do with those. But finally, these are not art, save in the sense that art is art for its own sake. Those are art. We're dealing with the dimension of human existence. We're dealing with man's creational capacities. And therefore, we're always dealing with man as a being who is thrusting out after his tomorrows and is always bringing into being his new tomorrows. This is what it means to be a creative human being. It is far beyond having some kind of an aesthetic appreciation of a painting, or having some nice feelings about what goes on in an area, or some unnice feelings, I guess would be for our time, what the aesthetic sense is, since that's the way art has come to us. Now, it has to do with that, but not finally with that. It has to do with man's age, sensitivities to life, as it's coming to him out of tomorrow. Therefore, the art that is really art is always the art that is ahead of its time. It's always that which is not that which comes up in age, or that which comes at the dead end of an age when it's all wrapped up, but the art that pushes us out beyond the dimensions in which we are comfortable in the midst of it. So we can see back through the whole history of Western culture how the art of a time can be classified according to the age in which it was born. In the ancient period, for example, the whole art of the time in the ancient period was characterized by the epic hero. And the epic hero was of that existence, that entity, that being, maybe even that person, but you want to say it's not a person because the epic hero was always a god, always one who was beyond the dimension of humanness itself. He was outside of our ordinary human experience, but he was our epic hero. He was the one who, in all the stories about life, was able to take the journey out into the desert, as the Bible puts it, or the journey out into irrationality, or absurdity, or tragedy, or any of the other areas that the ancients referred to. He was the one who could go out and conquer the beast, conquer the demons, conquer the vicissitudes of history, and return to bring us the cultural gift. And of course, this is not just in Western culture. Epic heroes seemingly were around the globe. You only have to look at the Aztec culture and how they referred to their great epic hero as the bringer of culture. And I forget at this moment his name, but he is the one who brought the whole Aztec culture to them, and he was the one who had come to them out of the plains lands, out of the backlands, and he had finally brought together all of the cultural wisdom. This is the epic hero. He was the god. He was the one who had, therefore, the capacity to cope with life. And this was the only one who was able to cope with life is obviously the one who is beyond life, or the epic hero. Then we move into the time of the medieval period of art, in which the primary hero here is the adventure hero. He is the hero who is always out to have the romantic vision, or he has the vision that is held within the legends, the folk tales, the fairy tales, the fables of the time. He is the hero god, so to speak, of this period, who has now been placed upon his throne, or he is the one who is now living among men, so to speak, or he is the one who is now ruling over existence and gives, therefore, final meaning to everything that goes on. Or you find in the Middle Ages, just everything that happened had its meaning, had its significance in relationship to the whole universe because of the sort of hierarchical, fulfilled universe, that holistic picture of life that was there in the Middle Ages that enabled him to do it. He would concretely be embodied, for example, in the knight or in the saint, either one. These were the people who, hero gods, but human beings, that is, they were large human beings who were able to deal with the elements, but their capacity was not simply the capacity to cope with life. Theirs was the capacity to risk life itself, or their capacity to risk life for a noble cause, whether it be the knight charging out to seek after the Holy Grail, or the saint going his barefoot way in order to bring about the kingdom of God. All of these were the adventure hero. And finally, you even have one such adventure hero like St. Francis, who, showing that all of life is that which one can risk oneself into, he talks with birds. But he not only talks with birds and flowers and nice, sweet things that we turn St. Francis into, he talks with his brother death. He talks with his brother suffering. He talks with the agonies of life as well as the goods of life. And so he risked himself into the midst of that. Then we go into the Renaissance period of art, or the rebirth of art, which is a very curious term, finally, when you talk about it, which has a whole different kind of a hero. He is now fully a man. He's not a god, and yet he plays the role of a god among men, so to speak, or he is the leader, hero. He therefore has the capacity not just to cope with life or not just to risk himself in adventure, but the capacity for historical participation, or really it should be put maybe civic participation, as the citizen who is the citizen of all citizens. And therefore he is concerned with the state and is concerned with fulfilling his obligations. But it comes out in many forms. The leader hero might be represented even in something like Rembrandt's self-portrait of his own portrait of himself, in which you see there in that portrait the leader, the hero, the one who is fully a man, but he's a great man. Or it may even come in other forms as it's come into our own day, like the sweet bird of youth, simply in the fascination of a face. That here is a hero that is able to move us beyond ourselves, so to speak. It was out of this, really, that came to be born in the next period the kind of individualism that you and I came to know. Because the leader hero, when it becomes fixed, that is, when it ceases to become the edge of the period, reduces itself down to the individual. And so when we move into the modern period, we find that suddenly the whole concept of hero in the edge of art is lost. And so the modern art has as its focus, or has as its vision, the equality among men. And of course, you know the political aspects of this, but the art of the period also represented. Here was bourgeois man having arrived. We think we're still have not gotten loose from this man, obviously, but here is the time in which he was on the very edge of history itself. Here is the time in which man, who now, so to speak, was once a god and then became a god among men, and finally a great man, and then now he is a man who is about our size. That is, he is a man who is fully a human being, but he is one who is capable, as all other men are capable of equality, or capable of his own individual creativity, and able to forge out for himself his sense of the time. Here's the birth of the novel, in which art becomes that which can be placed in the hands of every peasant, so to speak, and the beginning of our sense of life. And so you find someone even at the end of the period like Ibsen, who speaks even to our own day, the art is there in order to expose man's illusions about himself and show him how he actually is. And many of the artists of this time are capable of doing it. It's very documentary in a sense, it's scientific, but it also has within it its own kind of realism and so forth. Even back at the time of the French Revolution, here's the time of the rebirth of Greek classicism, which came out through someone like Jacques-Louis David, who painted his portraits in such a way that it looked like a statue. Here is a kind of a hard realism of being a human being that was represented here. Now this, of course, had its own perversions, as we know, and we began to see this as just sort of blah reproduction, representation of art. I'll come back to that a little later. In the postmodern time, therefore, the next stage, if man here decides to be man, so to speak, he now discovers himself that all of this reduces him down to where he's only about 6 inches high. And so you have Kafka's insect men and Camus' absurd men and paintings of freaks wearing business suits coming out of a painting. Man has become discarded. Man has become an animal. He's become less than being a full human being. And so we find the whole theater of the absurd, so forth and so on. But in the very midst of this, of man being reduced in all of his absurdity, there emerges a human being the likes of which history has never seen before. It's almost as though postmodern man had to come to terms with man's separateness, or, if you will, theologically, man's sin, in order to see himself as a full human being. And so man, now that very being that's emerging out of that canvas as a freak, is a human being that's about the job of creating the world, or he's about the job of bringing into being the new history of tomorrow. And so here is something unprecedented in history of art in terms of its holding together man's whole journey through life. That he no longer needs to hang on to his gods, or he no longer has to have his adventure heroes, or his leader heroes, or even no longer does he have to simply wallow among his fellows. He is now one who is a full creature, but a creature who creates, and a creature who arises to full humanness. Well, I'm sure in terms of concretions of the art of our time, that's still vague, but I think it sets the context in which to grasp hold of the art of our time and to begin to try to probe out what is the art of tomorrow, which of course is our real concern. But just to begin with, before dealing with the analysis of art in our time, the polarities of art that are present here, at least in our time, and presumably this kind of polarity has been there throughout the past. Art has been seen in the past as both an image and a symbol. That is, it has been that which obviously, directly, consciously, understandably points to a picture of life. Or here's what Herbert Reed calls the Apollinarian art, or art that is, its whole attempt is to perfect, that is, to make clear to us our picture or our image of reality. It is that which makes understandable to the people, so to speak, what the world is that they live in. And therefore it's built up out of our obvious sensations and responses to life, and gives the kind of representational, or giving to us again in a new form, and therefore an understandable form, life as it goes on about us. Now, I'm not saying that this is less art than this. This is a polarity within good art, authentic art itself. It tells us what reality is, what the truth is. But there's also this symbol. And to get hold of symbol here, you need a word like wow. It's that which rends us out of our lives. It tears us loose from all of our comfortable existences. It's intoxicating. It's a dance with the universal harmonies of the world. It's all of these wild, frenzic happenings that we discover the first time we bump into a new, authentic piece of art. It just tears loose our innards in a way nothing else has ever done. And so it is directly intelligible or understandable only to the initiate, or only to the few, only to that enclave of new artists who don't know what they're doing in one sense, but know what they're doing. or they're trying to grasp the mood of their time and give us a direct experience, therefore, with the nature of life. And so we, in one sense, we experience even more directly the truth about life. Whereas over here, we're given an image that represents the truth about life to us. Here we experience truth without anything in between, or a naked experience of truth. Or, to use Picasso at this point, he says that all art is a lie. All art is a lie, but it's a lie that enables us to realize the truth. And therefore, instead of being representational, it is interpretational. Or it is that which interprets our experiences to us before we experience it. Now, of course, in responding to art in our time, we find, many kinds of anti-intellectualisms, of anti-art, of this is not for the people, this has to do with some eggheads, and so forth, or really it's the whole argument between the highbrow and the lowbrow, that the lowbrow says that this is not practical, it doesn't have to do anything with my life, therefore I won't be concerned with it. And you see, in this sense, to go back to Picasso here, he's right. Art is a lie. It doesn't have anything to do with life. But on the other hand, the highbrow who says art is art, art is the thing, art is the way of getting it, he's right also, but they're both wrong. That is, art is the only way, finally, to experience as an individual the truth. But it is always that which is out beyond our ordinary experiences, and in that sense, a lie. You just confront these days and try to get your mind around what's happening in that wild orgy of a play of Saint Marat, and see what Peter Brooks has done here. If you don't experience the wild frenzy of the Dionysian art, if you call it that, over here, the wild symbolic art, then I don't understand you. But here he is demanding, almost as though that we be the vitalistic, ethereal, communal, temporeal human beings that are demanded in this kind of a wild universe that we are today. I am horribly offended. I've only read the reviews of Saint Marat and haven't even seen it as yet. But I know that it's one of the things that is speaking to our time, and I suspect it's speaking because it is pushing us out beyond our provincial relationships to life. Well, what then has taken place in art in the 20th century, and this is, of course, the key question that we're concerned with to try to get hold of art itself. What's happened in the 20th century is that we have had basically and still have present with us three types of art, or here's the model for art in the 20th century. We have Impressionism on the one hand, and Impressionism, born as it was out of the 19th century, had its concern with realism. Here's one of its basic concerns. But mark you, it was not the realism of the 19th century. That is, it was not simply trying to take a photograph of life. And so the landscapes of someone like Cézanne, for example, are landscapes that attempt to describe the way that landscape actually looked to Cézanne. And so he has, just dots up here finally. And out of these dots, there finally emerges a landscape that says, here's the way that landscape really is. And so what he depends upon in order to get hold of the reality that's actually there is his basic sensations of life. And he tries to paint those sensations in order to represent to us that reality. And this is his basic concern. So the concern here is for the art form, or it's concerned for the art piece itself, and how it discloses to us the truth, whether it be a landscape or a portrait or whatever. But it is not photography or not the simple trying to reproduce reality. In a way, this kind of art is trying to forget the old image form of art, or art that has to do with just giving us the way things are. It's trying to actually be true to nature rather than simplifying nature, or actually representing reality to us rather than presenting as some sort of sterile, unalive reality. And so here is a break from all of the art that comes before it, but with obvious overtones from it. And in one sense, every art piece you find back through all of history, at least in Western culture, is what they call architectonic, or is that simply, in one way, trying. Now, I have real questions of some art when they say this, when you get back beyond the 15th century, or even if you go back much further. For example, when you see some of those Minoan bisons that they painted on the caves, you find that something is going on there that was not simply trying to paint a bison. He was saying more his responses to the bison and so forth. Or you even take the Babylonian winged lions, you know. My word, what kind of a fantastic imagination called forth that kind of art. And yet you see that at least from the 15th to the 18th century, we were trapped in this kind of architectonic art, which played its role and had its edge at that time, but not in ours. Then we come to Expressionism, which is a move even beyond this. No longer are we concerned with representing reality in that sense. We are now concerned in Expressionism with abstraction, in the positive sense of that, abstraction of reality, or bringing the actual reality. But actual reality, as we know it here today, is not in the art form or even in the world out there. It's in the artist himself. And so his basic concern is with symbolism, and his symbolism is of his own expression. And so whereas here he used his sensations to grasp reality, here he uses just his expression of himself to grasp hold of basic symbolic understanding of life. And so you have the abstract art that came into being in our time, and the furthest extreme of which for me is still Jackson Pollock, who, as you know, took his pieces of tubes of paint and just sort of spread his visceral out over a canvas, and wasn't even disturbed once when one of his paintings was stolen or got lost somehow out of a gallery. He said, "Well, I'll just do you another." I mean, he's not concerned with the art form at all. He's concerned with his expression. He's concerned with getting himself out, and so however he can do that. But in the midst of this expressionism, and however much, we respond negatively and so forth to this, what happened here was the same thing that was going on in existential philosophy, in the theater of the absurd, other places. It was man's exposing of his absurd, crummy, dirty, meaningless existence, but exposing it as here is man's life. That is, it affirms human dignity even in the midst of man at his worst. And so, whereas here, man was trying to be true to nature, but really true to nature, here man, as it were, is trying to be man, or to disengage himself from nature in order to be more fully human. And so here his concern was for his own expression of himself. Art has now moved beyond expressionism, and I think we've all been aware of that for some time. We know that abstract art is simply one of the representations of our time is finally has become so familiar to us that even if we don't like it, we know it when we see it, or we know that it's the art of our time. And therefore, obviously, it is not the edge of art in our time. Before I leave Expressionism here, I wanted to say one thing more. You can see, particularly in Expressionism and something like Picasso's Guernica, which would, although in a way it has other relationships here too, but a lot of Picasso's work, any of it that you want to observe in this area, here are men struggling with the demons, and this is always the role of art. They were struggling with the very vicissitudes of life in our time. It's as though, as someone has put it, the artist lives between the gods, or if you wish, the demons, and men. And it goes about the job of doing the naming. Or to go back to even our earliest mythology, the job of the artist of the time was to go down into the deeps of what it means to be a human being in that time and name the gods. And when you've named them, you're then in control of them. Or when you name them, then your own creative response to life is available to you, but not until you have. Of course, in a way, psychology, you can see here even more directly the relationship between psychology and art. For in a way, psychology is an art, or it's the art of naming inner demons, but it also is a science, of course. And you see what's taking place there. Well, this last bit of art here, I want to call intentional art, for want of a better term. But what it's trying to point to here is an art that has as its basic concern not being simply realistic, or not simply trying to grasp hold of the other meanings of life, but trying to grasp hold of humanness itself, or trying to grasp hold of a humanism. And the way in which the intentional artist grasps hold of being a human is through his imagination. And if you can contrast that with sensations and expressions, you begin, or just expressing it oneself. That imagination is that quality of man. And here we have a hard time because we can't talk about faculties and essences within man as we have in the past. We're talking about a relationship, obviously, within man. But within man, he has an imagination, or he has that which deals with his senses and deals with his ability to express himself, but also brings to bear his rational capacities upon it. And so his imagination then enables him, and I wish I had another word here, to bring about the creation itself, or to bring about the molding of life about it. And so here you will find the art in which man is emerging out of the canvas, that picture of Bloom, the same one who painted out of this era, this understanding of art, the gangrene leg with its runny and oozing greens and reds and purples, the same one who painted that vast canvas of yellow. Just yellow with a little dot in the middle, which when you get up close is a little man. Well, here is the coming into being of intentional art, or the emerging image of man in our time. There's also a man down at the University of Texas who painted those businessmen coming out of those canvases. They're still warped, they're still distorted, but they're coming out. The one which for me is finally burst loose in the emerging image of man, and I don't even know the artist's name, and I don't even know where to find the painting. But I saw the painting in a book one time, and it was a vast sea of human faces, some of which were right up close, but just going out into nothing but human faces. And the name of it was the Red Chinese Army. And the offensive thing about it was the hope, the expectation, the joy of living that was on those faces. And here was man having emerged out into his full humanness, so to speak. But you could also look at things like Sean's handball court or Augustine's the clock and so forth in this area. You could also turn in a wholly different direction, in which it's not so much the emerging image of man, but all of this business of pop and op art, or even this art in which you find just a checkerboard of black and white, in which they sort of seem to move in and out of each other. You get dizzy finally the longer you look at it. And all you know is that guy who did that was not interested in getting hold of reality, nor was he interested simply in expressing himself. He was interested in doing something to you or to the viewer. His concern was not with the art form or with himself, but with the viewer of the art, or the guy who is looking at it. And you see many other kinds of expressions of it. Art, paintings that have laid on layers and layers of paint until the paint is coming out of the canvas itself. And you know that it's there in order to do something to you. It's not there for the other reasons that have been given. And so here is the model for what's taking place in art. So you can see that if this was being true to nature and disengaging oneself from nature to be human, here man now sees himself as one who is out to create nature itself, and therefore is emerging as the new form and putting art under a new aegis, the like of which it has never known. I want to point just quickly to a couple of what I consider to be edge areas in art beyond this, which I think will help grasp hold of what it means to get hold of the edge of a discipline. And one is the whole area that's being called meta-theater. Meta-theater, as it's spelled out particularly in this book by Lionel Abel, A-B-E-L, is trying to get hold of art as being that which is man's creative thrust over nature or over life itself. And he contrasts it with tragedy, saying that tragedy gives a stronger sense of reality of the world, but meta-theater gives by far the stronger sense that the world is a projection of human consciousness. The world itself is a projection of human consciousness. And tragedy glorifies the structure of the world, which it supposedly reflects in its own form, but meta-theater glorifies the unwillingness of the imagination to regard any image of the world as ultimate. And the way he's tying in here to the relativistic universe and the common sense of our time is obvious, I guess. Meta-theater makes human existence more dreamlike by showing that fate can be overcome. Meta-theater assumes that there's no world except that created by human striving and the human imagination. For meta-theater, order is something continually improvised by man. And then he finally winds up by saying that meta-theater makes us forget the opposition between optimism and pessimism by forcing us to wonder. And so I feel that here, he's pointing. He doesn't know what he's saying in a way, and yet he's looking out beyond himself to envision the kind of theater that calls upon men to mold the world about them, and what that would look like in a specific drama. I have only inclinations. I wonder if someone like Bertolt Brecht has, in a way, pointed in this direction, in which he has devised sort of puppet-like actors on a stage, who sort of go through their motions, but in the midst of going through their motions, they show that they're human. They show that man, if he does not control the industrial totalitarian society about him, is an idiot, or he is just a fool for not acknowledging his own humanness. And so the kind of art that seems to be coming into being out of this would be art that paints itself, whether it be on the theater or canvas, in bold, broad strokes about just the nature of the way the world is to be. Another area would be to look at what is happening in the area of the novel. A few years ago, it seemed as though the novel were going out of existence as a form. It only came into existence, as you know, in the 18th century, and therefore it seemed as though here was an art form that came into being that was leaving. But now it seems as though a new novel is being born, and it's a novel that is bringing together or synthesizing the world of our time. For you have here someone like Goldie, who, whether he acknowledges it or not, or the world acknowledges it or not, he is an anthropologist writing novels. Or Ken Kesey, in one field here, whether it be just a momentary study that he did, or whatever, he was a psychologist in writing that, who wrote a piece of art. Or Lagervist, who wrote The Sibyl, becomes a great one who's greatly acquainted with the mythologies of the world and writes a piece of art. Or Paul Goodman, sociologist, or, of course, Lauren Isley, when he writes The Amidst Journey, is obviously not writing a novel in the sense of a novel that we've known it in the past, but nonetheless, it's a novel form. Or he tells the whole story of man's evolution out of the swamps, and the fish that walks upon his tail fins in a fabulous kind of a way. And he is a trained naturalist. And so here is a new form coming into being, and because of the kind of synthesizing of expertise, scientific expertise, and artistic ability is showing how man can create his world, or how man, and this is even the theme, of course, of many of these novels that are being written. Well, I think this is about what I have to say on art, except to say this in conclusion, and that is, it is pretty clear, I suppose, for anyone who is sensitive in the dimension of the spirit, that there is no revolution without art, and there is no art save it is revolutionary. Or I'll call you back again to the Red Chinese Army, who, whether you see it as a portrait done out of the past, or whether you see it as a vision of a people of tomorrow, or whether you're horribly offended by it, you know that the kind of expectation, the kind of demand to create the world about you that it calls upon from you, this is pointing the direction in which we can get hold again of the arts and see them as vital to our understanding of them, and having our own pictures of what's taking place there. Let us go to the seminars.